It's been 2 years since the release of the Nintendo Switch, and one of the best games ever made, Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. In this gorgeous open world experience, you wake up as Link, 100 years after Calamity Ganon launched an attack on Hyrule, and are tasked with finishing the job you couldn't a century ago. But this made me wonder, if you were asleep for 100 years, why did Ganon not do his job? I mean, yes, Princess Zelda was able to hold him back this entire time, but not completely. When Ganon attacked Hyrule, he had an army of monsters, took over the Guardians, and he sent out 4 elemental phantoms to defeat each of the champions. He pulled a good old divide and conquer, without the conquer part. And before you go and say, but Zelda used the full Triforce to keep Ganon locked up, just remember that blood moons are a thing. And during the blood moon, you will hear Princess Zelda in your head telling you that Ganon's power grows.
It rises to its peak under the hour of the blood moon.
While this doesn't tell us that Zelda loses hold of Ganon, we can clearly see Ganon appear over Hyrule Castle, similar to how he shows up in the first cutscene of the game. His actions don't make him appear to be escaping, but rather showing his followers that he's alive and getting stronger. Zelda manages to pull him back in, but he shows no sign of defeat. I think that's enough to figure out that it is Zelda who's slowly losing the constant tug of war they've been having for the past century. So that brings us to the question of, if Ganon can overpower Zelda, even a little bit, and he had the entire army thing going on for 100 years, how come the entire map isn't taken over by Ganon's forces? Was his goal simply to conquer Hylians? Or did he not achieve it in the first place? I think the best way to understand this is to look at Ganon's spread of influence. We can assume that he intended to conquer any part of the land where we can find monsters, Yiga clan members, or guardians. Which, spoiler alert, it's the entire map. Except, life kinda just went on. The villagers seemed to be safe from monsters. Yes, you would see a few of them cause trouble every now and then, like stealing sheep from Hateno village, but they weren't running everything. And the Yiga clan seemed to be set on finding and destroying Link, even though when we last saw him 100 years ago, he was obviously about to die. And as we read in Pura's diary, the Shrine of Restoration wasn't even fully tested and ready to go. They didn't even know that Link was gonna come back. He might have failed, he might have just drowned in there, dead. And if that wasn't silly enough, how about the Guardians? When playing the game, the only thing the Guardians will ever target is Link. In the cutscenes of the past, we can see them destroying buildings and attacking everything, but in the present, they only attack us, the hero of Hyrule. Is it just me, or is over half of Ganon's army just trying to make sure Link is dead? And all the while, they could have just taken over everything, but they didn't. So you might say, well, Link is Ganon's only known threat at this point. Assuming he's defeated would be all Ganon needs to proceed with his takeover attempt. Except that if he had actually taken over, it would be much easier to find and take down Link. So something else must be going on here. While Ganon is able to show his strength during Zelda's momentary lapses of power, I think he might be struggling when it comes to communicating with his followers. Based on his attack, it's pretty obvious that Ganon was prepared to counter the countermeasures that took him down 10,000 years ago. The first being the army of guardians, which he possessed, check. The second being the 4 divine beasts, which he also took over, check, check. The princess, who had the Triforce, didn't have it yet, check-ish. And the knight, who had the sword which steals the darkness. While Zelda's preoccupied with holding Ganon back, Link was still at large, and his death was unconfirmed. Therefore, Ganon's forces had one mission left: find and dispose of Link. Taking over the world had to wait, because if Link was still alive, he could foil the entire plan, and so instead of taking over, everyone just looked for Link. For over a century. It just doesn't feel right. It's almost as if everyone was still acting on instructions given 100 years ago. Consider the easiest enemy that Ganon could have relayed information to, the Guardians. He can't directly communicate with the Yiga or the monsters, but he directly took over the Guardians. Changing their prescribed job would be as simple as sending out another message to them during blood moons, which happens quite often. But the roar he does instead isn't doing that. Same for the Divine Beasts, which are piloted by Ganon's elemental phantoms. They're basically like little mini Ganons, look at them. They look like they're running on standby, causing little trouble for the locals, but not really attacking anything. And if Ganon was able to communicate with at least one of them, perhaps they would have relayed the message to all of his other followers. So it appears to be that Ganon failed to take over Hyrule because he's unable to communicate with his army. They look like they're following his instructions from 100 years ago and haven't changed their objective. Perhaps it's a waiting game. Perhaps it's overconfidence on Ganon's side. But neither of those makes sense, because why would Ganon choose to waste his followers' time? Or give Zelda any false hope that she has a chance of winning? Now, I think the issue here is that while Ganon's preoccupied with Zelda, he is unable to communicate with his forces, and that his initial instructions weren't proactive enough. And there you have it. The reason Ganon failed to take over Hyrule in 100 years is poor communication skills. The end. It would be nice if it were that simple. However, when we look at the last memory Link uncovers, where the Guardians are about to land their final hit on Link, Zelda steps in to stop them. The last thing the Guardians see before their defeat is Princess Zelda with her full powers and Link still alive. When they were destroyed, we can see malice float out of them, but we have no way of knowing if it just evaporates or goes back to Ganon. If it's the latter, then Ganon knows Link is alive and Zelda has her powers, but if it was the former, how could Ganon's followers know that Link is still living if that information never got to Ganon? And it didn't get to Ganon because if he knew, he would have changed his strategy to protect himself from Zelda rather than just find Link and worry about Conquer later. The answer lies in modern technology, and it's an issue that we have to discuss in our world: artificial intelligence. AI at its base is just a system's ability to correctly interpret external data, to learn from that data, and to use those learnings to achieve specific goals. However, modern AI also uses connections with other AI to share information and learn from each other. For example, self-driving cars will communicate with each other so that if one has an accident, all the others will know exactly what happened and update their information and protocols to avoid such accidents in the future. This is great for when the goal is our safety, but it can also pose a huge threat. Since AI has no morals or ethics, it can just do whatever is best for its goals. For instance, if an AI's job is to maximize revenue, it might make some decisions to cut corners on quality, or take some actions that might end up being harmful to the final consumers. And if you want to see AI gone totally wrong, check out Age of Ultron. Now back to Hyrule we go. The Guardians are clearly a form of AI. They are non-organic beings and they're able to process information and act on it to complete their goals, eliminate Link. If the Guardians who last attacked Link registered him as living and then communicated it to other Guardians, they would know he's still out and about and keep on searching. So the real question is, do Guardians have access to wireless communication with each other? Because if they can communicate with each other through Wi-Fi, then the Link is alive message would have been communicated to all the other Guardians. And there's a very easy way to test this. Just go to an area where there's a lot of Guardians near each other and see if being targeted by one of them will notify the others of your location. The best place to test this out is the Lomé Labyrinth Island, where you can drop down into a room full of Guardians. So the test is very simple. Our question is, can Guardians communicate with one another? And our answer will depend on whether or not being targeted by one Guardian will lead others to target you. So let's see what happens. It looks like they aren't communicating with each other. There's a walking Guardian that won't come after you unless you get close enough, and the immobile ones won't activate or lock onto you as soon as one of them does. What does this mean for the whole Ganon theory though? Well, if the Guardians couldn't communicate with each other wirelessly and the malice just evaporated from when Zelda went all Medusa on their faces, then there's no way Ganon would have known that Zelda unlocked her full powers and that Link was close to death. Which is why he never changed the instructions he gave his followers. By the time he learned of Zelda's powers, it was all too late. So Ganon was trapped while Link recovered from his wounds in a 100-year slumber. And all the monsters, Guardians, and Yiga clan members were left with their seek and destroy mission. Had the Guardians been able to send wireless messages, things wouldn't have gone so well for the land of Hyrule. Makes you wonder how safe it is that we're making all of our technology smart and able to communicate to others wirelessly. Do you think there's any other reasons why Ganon failed to take over? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Also, consider supporting me on Patreon, that would be very much appreciated. Thank you, bye.